So you have an idea, but what kind of idea is it?
I don't understand. That's easy. My idea is a form of cosmic government wherein everyone looks to my puppet, but I'm pulling the interdimensional strings from behind the scenes.
Sorry, that's on me. So, what I should have said is you have an idea for a writing project, but you're not sure whether it's best expressed as a poem or an essay or something else. And that's a common concern, but it's solved easily enough by understanding some basics about the various genres and what they're each good at.
Like how I'm good at ruling from the shadows.
Sure, like that. But seriously, today I want to show you that any idea could, realistically, be the seed for any kind of project, but then use that to help you see the relative differences between the big three: fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, all to help you get a better sense of how to bring your ideas to life more effectively. But first, today's video is brought to you by me. One of the most useful ways to grow as a writer is to get actual feedback from readers. I mean, how else can you really develop a sense of how someone who isn't you understands what you wrote? But good feedback can be difficult to find, which is why I began offering feedback and consultation services a few years ago, which you can find on my doing business site, Goldfinch Media, which is also still just me. Anyway, in order to meet writers wherever they are in the process, I'm available in two ways. If you want to spend some time talking through creative challenges, writing process issues, or just idea generation, you can book a consultation. We'll meet on Zoom and spend some time talking through whatever's got you stuck. If you already have something written though, and you want some more focused help, then that's where the written feedback services come in. You submit your work and I send it back with comments that reflect my thoughts while I was reading, in addition to a feedback report that looks at key strengths and areas for revision across your work as a whole. As always, my goal is to help you to make more purposeful decisions as you revise. Now, I can count on one hand the number of sponsors I've taken on the show, and frankly, I've decided to keep it that way. I think it's much more interesting for me and much more valuable for you if I just share the services I already offer to help you with your writing, rather than promote someone else's writing adjacent product. I mean, if you only knew the number of emails I get from AI companies asking me to pitch their stuff to all of you. But anyway, if you're looking for individualized help with your writing and you like the approach that I take on the show, I hope you'll include me in your process. I've worked with writers on a range of projects, from poems and essays to novels, presentations, and even doctoral dissertations. So for help with whatever you're working on, the link is, as always, in the description. But genre, we should get back to that, huh?
Only if we have to. Now you've got me all excited to talk about puppet regimes.
Yeah, well, that might be something for another day.
Fine, bore them with genre. See if I care.
Now, you might be familiar with genre as it's usually applied to aisles in libraries or bookstores. You've got fantasy, sci-fi, romance, and genre works pretty similarly when it comes to movies and TV. Sometimes, though, that common understanding of genre might mislead us a little into thinking that genre is just about aesthetics. Slap a 10-gallon hat, a horse, and a sepia filter on it, and you've got a Western no matter what else happens. But actually, I think video game genres give us the clearest idea of what a genre really is. If you're playing a role-playing game, for example, you can expect to have a certain kind of experience. You're probably building your own character, clicking through dialogue options, gaining experience in order to gain levels and increase your character's abilities, and often building a team of companions to join you on your journey. Now, whether the game has the aesthetics of high fantasy, post-apocalyptic ruins, or a far-off galaxy, the fundamental experience of playing a role-playing game remains more or less consistent. And the same is true of other genres. Regardless of the aesthetic wrapping, playing a platformer will mean jumping around. Playing a strategy game will mean collecting resources and building armies of little guys, and playing a roguelike will mean doing the same thing over and over, but getting slightly better at it each time. And that's really what I mean when I say genre. In the same way that you can expect a role-playing game, whatever it's about, to give you a certain kind of experience when you play it, you can also expect a poem, whatever it's about, to give you a certain kind of experience too. And the same is true broadly of fiction and nonfiction. So when you get an idea to write something, one of the first reasonable questions to ask is, what kind of experience does this idea seem to set up? Just as certain game ideas work better with some genres versus others, certain literary ideas lend themselves more or less to certain genres. But rather than just tell you, I want to show you what this could look like with an idea that I've been sitting on and struggling to know what to do with for quite a while. So once upon a time, I moved to a place that had a lot of shrubbery, and I didn't really give it a second thought at first. It makes sense that bushes would grow in highway medians and empty lots and beside trails, but one day in early fall, almost every single one of them exploded in yellow flowers. I mean, it was incredible. There were bright yellow flowers everywhere I went. And then, just as quickly as those shrubs had bloomed, they all withered and went dormant for the winter. And I don't know exactly why, but it's something I've thought a lot about since. There is a writing idea in there somewhere, but for what? Well, maybe if it were a short story, it could be a story about the little guys that live inside the shrubs and their annual fall-tacular, where the denizens of each shrub festoon their village with bright yellow to outdo their neighbors and celebrate the end of summer. And maybe the story is about Rumbo of the Rabbit Brush, a well-meaning but clumsy assistant to the mayor who wakes up the day before the festival and realizes that he never took the mayor's regalia to the tailor to have it altered. Thus ensues the madcap adventure through the shrubby village as Rumbo searches for someone who can get the regalia altered in time for the mayor's big speech. Now, if we look at the genre of fiction in general, what kinds of things contribute to the experience that fiction delivers? What makes this idea for a story an idea for a story?
Well, it's a bunch of made-up nonsense. I can't believe you're putting that out there.
Well, it is true that being made up is part of the definition of fiction, but poems can also be based on made-up or fictionalized things, so there's more to the difference than just that. In simple terms, fiction is driven by story or by narrative, so it's not just enough to describe the yellow bushes. To make it a story, I have to devise a plot, some sequence of events that logically follow one another. Rumbo goes looking for an emergency tailor because he forgot to get it done before, and everything else that happens is a natural consequence of that initial problem. And of course, Rumbo is here, so writing fiction means creating characters and giving them personalities, desires, and motivations that move the plot. Rumbo of the Rabbit Brush is a fantastical character, but we could just as easily create something more grounded. Maybe an aging widow who ends up taking care of her troubled grandson for a summer and tries to get him not to squander his youth. And then maybe they come to some cathartic mutual appreciation just as the Rabbit Brush is blooming for a climactic resolution to their narrative arcs. Either way, it's just as hard to write fiction without characters as it is to write fiction without a plot. These are, for the most part, essential to the experience of the genre. Well, I should be more careful for any wandering pedants out there. If I say that a bird is a kind of animal with a small round body, little legs, and wings it uses to fly, that's not because I don't know about ostriches. It's because when someone says bird, it's so much more likely that someone is going to encounter or think of something that looks like this rather than this. So while you can have a bird that doesn't fly and you can write a story without a plot, most stories have plots, and most readers will expect one. The existence of genre-defying pieces does not invalidate the prototypical features of that genre. Okay, but because I am me, we can all be pretty sure that my yellow-blossomed bush idea is not an idea for a story, because the idea of writing stories doesn't really excite me. But it would be reasonable to accuse me of leaning towards poetry, so what about that? Maybe it could even go something like this. All summer, the shrubs sat in clusters of silvery green among the amber grass until, all at once, they erupted in golden bloom, so that everywhere the roadsides were hedged with joy, blossoms reaching, reflecting the sun's retreating gleam. And it was all I could do not to stare, to spend the days lost in that riot of yellow, which vanished just as quick, leaving only winter to hiss frigid through dried and faded stems. I mean, maybe. But notice what this poem does differently from the story. We don't have characters or plots. The goal here is not to tell a story, it's to present an experience and communicate an emotion. Consequently, the poem relies on imagery, specific descriptions of things that are meant to evoke emotions, and it uses heightened language to do it, like the repeated consonant and vowel sounds in reaching, reflecting the sun's retreating gleam. And of course, you can use poetic language in a story, but you can tell a story without it. And it's not controversial to write a poem without characters, but readers will probably be disappointed by a poem that doesn't demonstrate careful attention to the qualities of language. But that's the key. Poems and stories both have something to say, but the kinds of things they say and the way they go about it are different. Our Rumbo of the Rabbit Brush story might have something to say about tradition and procrastination and the importance of community, and it does it by guiding readers through Rumbo's experiences correcting his error of forgetting to get the mayor's regalia altered in time. And then this poem has something to say about the passage of time and fleeting pleasures, which it does by describing the unexpected appearance of yellow flowers, followed by their equally unexpected and sudden disappearance. Of course, we've also got a third option, nonfiction. So what if this idea found its expression in a personal essay? I mean, maybe I could write about the flowering shrubs and then try to work through why it's stuck in my head as long as it has. Maybe it has to do with anxieties about the passage of time, how the shrubs bloomed for only a short while and then looked dead for half the year, and what if my best days are behind me? But that's not quite it, is it? The shrubs will bloom again, but why so briefly? I guess because the flowers have done their job and there's really no need for them after that. But what if they were yellow just a little bit longer? And is that just like the time that someone gave me my favorite candy when I was a kid, and instead of eating it, I just saved it until it went bad? Because as soon as I ate it, then I wouldn't have it. Or is it like that show that I enjoyed so much years ago that I refused to watch the series finale so I would never actually finish it? Maybe then, whatever I'm feeling is less about how time passes and we all die, and maybe more about my own grasping for good things. A kind of deep-rooted reluctance to let a good thing go, even if, bafflingly, that means letting my favorite candy rot instead of eating it. And now this is just a summary of a possible essay, but you can probably see how it works differently from the other two. The essay isn't telling a story. It's not evoking emotions through imagery. Instead, it's finding an idea and then analyzing it from various angles, proposing other ideas, refuting them, working towards some deeper understanding, but performing that process on the page. Thanks to our time in school, we might have the unfortunate idea that an essay is what you write after you've done the research in order to report on what you know. But the true heart of the essay genre is the figuring out, the discursive talking through of something. More than once, I've met with writers who were struggling with their own nonfiction and then who suddenly got it when I gave them permission to work things through on the page. The essay isn't about knowing. It's about the process of finding out. In some ways, the essay shares that performance of process with fiction, but a story shows a process of events. The character does one thing and then does another thing. But the essay shows a process of ideas and vignettes, proposing an idea and illustrating it with an anecdote or supporting it with a quotation or whatever else happens to come to mind. And while poems and essays both often grow out of lived experiences, a poem that talked as much as an essay did would probably drive its readers away. And at the same time, an essay that did as little digging and redigging as poems often do would probably leave a reader wondering where the rest was. So, as we've seen, it really is possible to make whatever you want out of any idea you have. But it's also true that some genres and ideas harmonize better than others. As you gain experience with your writing, it will probably become more immediately intuitive. You'll get an idea hefted in your palm and know exactly what to do with it. But earlier on, and for some more evasive ideas, it might take some work. And honestly, you could just do what we did here together. Give your idea a test run in each genre and see which one speaks to you. In this case, as much as I've tried to force a poem out of the rabbit brush flowers, I really think the discursive abundance of the essay and the dramatized attempt to figure it out is where the real experience should lie. Why? Well, because part of the idea is that I don't really know why the idea is so arresting to me. Presenting it in the digested impressions of poetry feels inauthentic to me, and trying to get to that conclusion too soon would probably lead me to the wrong conclusion. I mean, I could almost certainly write a poem about the rabbit brush, and it would likely even be a nice poem, but it probably wouldn't be the poem. Rather than try to squeeze some insight into, or maybe out of, a tiny poem, the capaciousness of the essay would allow me to bring in multiple perspectives, experiences, and methodologies to really get to the bottom of this background obsession I have with blooming shrubs. Of course, because I am me, my essay is bound to have a more poetic flavor as it borrows lyrical techniques, and who can say? Maybe drafting an essay will show me the way to turn it all back into a poem, but that's a problem for another day. The short version is that now that I've tested out the idea in each of the three major genres, the essay feels the most promising. It looks like the kind of tool that will help me to figure out what I have to figure out, and that will offer my reader the kind of experience I want them to have as we discover that answer together.
Well, good for you, bud. What about the people watching?
Well, you could just do the same thing and test things out. It is kind of an involved process, though, and I've never actually done it until right now. But I did want to show you how an idea takes shape in each of these three genres to give you a sense of what each one does and how the quality of your idea can inform the kind of project you want to take on. So, is your idea full of characters and plot moving through a world of your own making? If so, that's an easy sign it's a fiction idea. But even if it's not obviously fiction, an idea that is rooted in people acting and interacting, in the relationships between actions and their causes and effects, and in the development and resolution of inciting events, then odds are you're dealing with an idea for a story, because that's what stories do best. Or is your idea rooted in a single image or observation? Does it arise from a collage of a few images or experiences? Are you most interested in investigating and communicating a mood, or, for lack of a better word, a vibe? If so, you might be headed to the land of poetry, especially if you find yourself crafting precise, condensed phrases to express it all. Of course, long poems are possible, but because the prototypical poem is often shorter, a smaller idea is probably best suited for poetry. If you want to get in, drop your literary bombshell, and then get out, well, that's what poems often do best. Now, if your idea is not rooted in characters or actions or images or language, but it's more about ideas and investigations and testing theories, well, then the essay might be where you're headed. The essay is kind of a catch-all genre in some ways, so there's room for bits of narrative or poetic passages, but at the heart of the genre is the figuring out, the attempt to make sense of something. So if your idea has ragged edges, branching complexity, or a broad scope, the essay will probably be more useful than anything else. And again, we're talking about the prototypical centers of the genres. Raccoons, cats, and rabbits are all mammals, but so are river dolphins. You can write a poem that looks an awful lot like narrative fiction, or a story that looks an awful lot like an essay, but even then, it's worth remembering that no matter how much a dolphin may look like a fish, it still shares key traits with other mammals. The most essayistic poem still has to be a poem, no matter how much it borrows from the essay, and the most poetic flash fiction is still fiction at its heart. Genres shape experiences. Someone who reads a poem is looking for a particular kind of experience, and that's going to be different from what a reader of narrative fiction is looking for. But you can also think of genres as something like research methodologies. If you have an idea, something you're trying to express, then the tools of one genre will lead you to different results versus another, in just the same way that the tools of rhetorical analysis will lead you in different directions compared to the tools of psychological interviews. And as a final thought, another thing that will probably help is to spend some time reading various things from each of the genres. If you haven't read much contemporary nonfiction, for example, how will you know that you have an idea for an essay? And if you haven't read many poems, how will you catch the idea for a poem when it eventually comes? Read widely, and I don't mean study each piece like you were writing a paper on it, but just read a lot of things and develop an intuitive sense of what each genre does best. I mean, the more you use a food processor, the more you understand what it can and can't do, and the same is true of literary genres. If after all that, though, you're still bewildered, well, maybe that's where I can come in. Book a consultation and we can work together to get to the bottom of your creative quandaries.
Or do something better and dedicate your life to something more sensible than writing.
More sensible? You mean like alchemy, bud?
I mean, why not? But no, not everyone can handle the depths of those mysteries. Few there are who have surveyed the shadows and achieved true greatness.
Oh, how few?
Well, me, just me, which is why I'm the only one qualified to orchestrate a puppet trans-dimensional government.
Yeah, you keep mentioning that.
Look, don't worry, I've got a lot of irons in the fire. For now, I'm mostly just seeing how it feels to say out loud. Generalized dysfunction suits me just as well as being in charge, and we have that already for free. But speaking of irons and fire, you mentioned role-playing games in faraway galaxies, so do you want to wrap this up? I've got places to be.
What do you mean?
Oh, it doesn't concern you. Just say goodbye and let's move on.
Okay, well, I don't know what that's about, but hopefully you found some clarity to help you navigate the unpredictable and sometimes elusive ideas that pop into your head. Write those ideas down, test drive them in different genres if you want, and let them loose in the most fitting form you can find. And if it doesn't work, just try something else. That's what this is all about. And with that, we'll leave you till next time. Take care, and we'll see you then.